So once you've established or identified the characteristics of your industry structure, of your competitive environment, how do you respond to this? Well, you do it by selecting a competitive strategy. The two dominant competitive strategies, according to Porter's model, are differentiation and cost. So either you are the lowest cost or you are going to compete based on some sort of you have a different product. Now, frequently this is a better product or service in the than your competitor or across the industry or something like that. I like to think about it as using this word different. You're a different company, okay? And in what you're different, you're likely quite better. But I want to focus on that because by looking at different, that means you can actually focus your attention rather than think, well, we're just going to be the best. Okay, because frequently, especially when you start looking at these models for the first time, you think, well, okay, who's who in the computer industry works on cost? Well, people classically would say Dell Computers. Well, who focuses on differentiation? Well, that would be Apple. Apple costs more, and their product is deemed as more classy, higher, whatever. Okay, and at least for personal computers. Now, if you're looking at buying servers, which we'll get into later in the class, then it may be something different in terms of what the relationship is. But that's competing in a different industry and a different product set. Okay, but for personal computers, you may be dealing with like an Apple versus Dell type of thing, or a car, you might be dealing with like I don't even know what the low-end cars are these days. And when I was growing up, it was like a Ford Pinto or a Volkswagen Rabbit versus like a BMW. Okay, so these are different options, but when you step back and think, well, what makes the BMW different? That really helps because just saying, well, it's a better car. Well, better in terms of what? This might be better in terms of road handling, in terms of fewer maintenance costs, miles per gallon. There are different things to excel at. There's ways to be different. And that's really a key takeaway that I want you to focus on is you can compete on cost. And since this is an information systems class, we'll be looking at ways that information systems can help us reduce the costs. But in today's economy, solely competing on cost is rarely going to allow you to succeed. Okay? You've got to be different in another way in order for it to stand out among your competitors in today's economy. It's just cost alone is not going to be sufficient. Okay? So that's my personal take on Porter's model. Now, so that kind of goes within, there's this other part, there's cost, there's differentiation, and then there's scope within your industry. Okay, so you can have the lowest cost across the industry or lowest cost across a certain industry segment. Okay, or a better product across the industry or a better product within a certain segment. So we provide the best higher education experience to members of the church in the Asia Pacific region. Okay, that may be BYU's differentiation focus strategy versus we provide the best higher education experience across all segments of the industry. Okay, so that's a different experience. But once again, I'd say that increasingly in today's economy, it's not necessarily we're better in everything because increasingly no company is better at everything. You're better at certain things, and being able to identify those, which lends more toward a focusing differentiation, remains critical. Okay, so those are kind of, you compete on cost and you compete because you're different, and identifying what makes you different in terms of which parts of your product or service you're going to make stand out so that it resonates with people. That's really your differentiation strategy, and identifying what segment or what part of the industry you want to focus on is a very important decision. So that's how you respond. You look at your competitive environment, you look at your industry structure and say, these are the forces that I'm dealing with. Now, how do I survive in all of that? Okay, how can I find my niche? How can I find where I can survive best in this environment? So you pick one of these strategies, and you'll talk in your strategy class about how you can do this, or you can just go out and read Michael Porter's book, or various books about competition, competitive strategy. things like that. That will do it as well. Okay, so once we've gone through industry structure with the 5 forces model, then we have Porter's 4 competitive strategies. Then we go to Porter's other model, which is the value chain. Now this is another really popular model, and it's made its way into all kinds of textbooks. And it comes from this model is like 30 years old, when the dominant industry in the United States was manufacturing. So when you look at this, you really see manufacturing in terms of its influence on the model, okay? Because there's these various stages in a value chain process. And along each, it's called the value chain because you kind of think about this like an assembly line. And the product is moving along and moving along, and more product is coming. And at every step of the way, something new is being added on that adds value. Okay, so you can kind of think of it, we assemble a little bit, it goes here, and then the chassis for the car goes forward, and somebody puts wheels on it, and it goes forward, and somebody puts an engine in it, it goes forward, and every step along the way, something's being improved on this. This is a value chain. Now, in terms of business, what we have are these stages along this conveyor belt, along this chain, in which a business can add value. So you take your raw materials, your inbound logistics, we call it. This is the process of bringing things in from multiple suppliers and putting it in one place. Okay. Now you could be a factory bringing in things from multiple suppliers so you can assemble materials into a car. You could be a bakery, bringing raw materials in like flour and eggs and milk and sugar to make bread. Okay, so you can do a lot of these things in a lot of different contexts. You can take uneducated students and bring them in. You gradually are bringing that and expertise and textbooks and materials, and you get knowledgeable graduates out the other end. Okay, that's another model of looking at this. But we're bringing in the materials. Okay, we're bringing in the inputs to our process. And even if I just brought these inputs in and just set them down here so that somebody else could do something, I've added value. Okay, you go to Ace Hardware and you look and you see they've got buckets of different types of nails. Okay, they got them from different suppliers and they put them there for you. Okay, so you could, if you wanted to, you can walk in and grab. I need some of these nails and some of these nails and some of those nails, and I'll go get some wood. So they've put it all together for you in one place. So that is value adding. But it adds additional value if you take those inputs, the nails out of the bucket, the wood off of out of the back lot, and some paint off of the shelf, and you build yourself a shed. Okay, now you've added more value, and that brings us to the next step. So we have inbound logistics, and then we have operations. Okay, now operations is what you do. It's this transforming process to take your raw inputs, you transform them, you process them, and you create finished goods out of them. Okay, so that's what it does. Okay, so whether you're baking or whether you're assembling bicycle parts or whether you're building a shed, whether you're educating a student, we look at it in the same way. Your raw materials are being transformed in your operations stage. Okay, so once you've done this operations, well, what do you need to do then? Then you need to get it out. You need to get your product out. So we have outbound logistics. So we have this process. I need to get it out the door. I'm going to ship my finished product. I'm going to send my French bread to stores all across the country. I'm going to ship my bicycles to Walmart stores across the country. Okay, once we've gotten them kind of placed out and sent out, well, then we have kind of the sales and marketing. Okay, so I've distributed all my products out so that they're closer to the customer so that they can get them. And then I'm going to try and sell them. Okay, I get the auto dealers to add value by bringing customers in, and they can match what they need, what they want, with the products that we've distributed. Okay, sales and marketing. Okay, so the customer goes home, they drive their fancy new car off the lot, they take it home. The next week, the transmission falls out of the bottom, and they're back, and now they need service and support. So that's the last stage. So I say, okay, I see you have a problem. The product was defective. We'll replace it with this. Or, oh, you need more training on how to use that new exercise equipment you bought. Okay, we can provide that. Oh, your computer's not working. All right, we can provide that too. Service and support, training for using the product, and a service on resolving customer problems post-purchasing. Okay, So those are the stages of this value chain. We bring in raw materials, we transform them in operations, we distribute them out so that they're closer to the customer, we get them out of our factory with our outbound logistics, we sell them to the customer, we let them know what needs they can meet with our product, and we kind of match those needs with what we have available, and then we provide post-sales service and support. Each step along this way of what we call these primary value chain activities allows us to add value so that our customers can give us money. Because in traditional economic thought, we take, I have something that I can do something with my inputs and my resources that you can't do. Like you wouldn't spend all of your time building a computer. You'd rather buy one. Okay, similar type of thing. But there's someone who's really good at building computers, or organizations that do this. And so you can exchange money for their expertise, and they add value to you. Okay, so at every step of the way, we're adding value. In addition to adding value, we're adding cost to our organization. So that has to be figured in. Now, the difference between the value we add at each step and overall, and the cost that keeps accruing or keeps adding at each stage of this value chain is what we call the margin. Okay, it's the difference between the value we're adding and the cost that it takes to create that value. And ideally, your margin is positive. If you have a negative margin, that means it's costing you more than the value that you're creating. And if that's the case, you either need to relook at how you're adding value, or you need to go find some other way to add value for your customers, because this isn't really meeting its needs. Okay? So, for example, as an educator, I could perhaps add value by sitting down and reading the entire book to you and talking with you. I'll visit you in your home and I can tutor you on the homework. That might add value to you, but it's very costly for me. And the benefit I get is really negligible because I'm salaried. So I get paid the same amount of money for my time, whether I'm spending 24 hours a day or whether I'm spending 8 hours a day working to educate you about how to do this. So I need to figure out, well, what adds the greatest amount of value while not dramatically increasing my costs beyond that value. So I try to find ways of doing that. Okay? So along with these primary activities, we also have what's called support activities. This is what keeps the lights on in the building, okay, as we say. The accounting function in most organizations is not a core value chain activity. It's not a primary activity, but it's necessary to keep the business running. Same thing with human resources. Okay? Same thing with facilities management. Same thing with building construction or whatever you have. All of these other things that are required to keep the business going are called support activities for the value chain. So we have primary activities and support activities. And depending on the nature of your business, you may choose to outsource or contract with someone else to provide various support activities or potentially various primary value chain activities. So you just focus on one small part of that and let someone else deal with the rest. For example, you might decide that UPS does a much better job at coordinating and tracking your shipping than you could. So you'll just outsource that function and they'll manage all of your shipping and coordination, and you work with them very closely to manage most of that process. Okay. So that's primary value chain activities and support activities in Porter's value chain model.